I'll never forget the first time I met Gordy Sampson. For those of you who don't know who Gordy is, which is probably many people, any more than you know me, really, the man's a genius. He wrote songs like Jesus Take the Wheel for Carrie Underwood or whoever recorded that. And then he wrote Paris for Faith Hill. And he's written songs for everybody. Every major country music star has covered one of his songs. And this guy's from Big Pond, Cape Breton Island. That's where he's from. And he's one hell of a guitar player. And I remember meeting him for the very first time. And as I have a scant few times in my career, I've run into people and heard them play and thought, man, oh man, he needs a slap. I say that with the greatest of affection. I don't mean it literally. I just mean the guy. People. Sometimes I meet people that are so good that it's just like they need a slap. They need to slow down so that we can catch up to them. And I remember meeting Gordy. He was a very young man, and I was young then. I was 27, 28 years old, and he was a bit younger than me, I think. And the very first time I ever got to work with him was the Guitar Summit. I've talked about this in an earlier episode, but basically there was a summer concert series happening in Bedeck that was being put on at the big high school auditorium all summer long. They needed some kind of a headlining draw for this thing, and they asked Max and Joel at Rave Entertainment to figure that out. And so Max took me in his office one day and said, what is your dream show? And I said, well, you really want to know? And Max said, yes, I want to know. He looked a bit nervous when he was waiting for this answer. And I said, well, my dream would be to have me and three other guitar players all just sitting on chairs in a semicircle, playing our asses off for 2 sets. Just the best guitar players that I like, my favorite guitar players, to get them all on stage in one place. And I said we could call it the Guitar Summit. And Max went, whoa, that's a brilliant idea. So then we were like, who do you want? And I said, well, there's only 3 guys I can think of right now that would turn this into something spectacular. And that would be Dave McIsaac, Scott McMillan, and Gordy Sampson. And so it happened. It happened actually two or 3 years in a row, actually. It was so popular the first year, it was just popular, and it never waned. It's still going to this day, like 25 years later. The Guitar Summit is still happening every October in Celtic Colors. It's been done with symphony. It's been done in the Cohen. And I've been there's 4 of us I consider to be the original founders, but I've been in every one, and I've usually, as years went on, I always get to pick the players that were with me in these shows, and it's been one of my favorite things that I've ever done in my whole career is is the summit, and to have gained the respect of a lot of players, that are excited to come do the show, and that means a lot to me, right? And of course, I've put together some killer, some killer groups of players. And, this is how I met people like Anna Massey and Tim Eady and Tony McManus, and just a bevy of players. John Doyle, all kinds of players I've got into this thing, and man, it's been incredible. We've even had Dan Crary. We had Dan Crary in it. We had John Allen in it. We had everybody, every single guitar player that I could possibly muster, and going out on the road and stuff and finding new players and thinking, I'm going to get this guy, going to have Celtic Colors call this guy, for October so they can come down and do the summit. And it has been absolutely incredible. I should also say, too, that Gordy Sampson is one half of the partnership that started Lake Wind Sound with Fred Lavery. Gordy and Fred started that studio, and Another Morning was cut there. And Gordy, I think, was on that record, playing some electric, I think, on one of the cuts. And so, I just always just loved Gordy. Gordy was just a super nice, funny, irreverent dude. I was just always loved being around him. And it wasn't too much longer after the summit happened, and we, him and I were, really enjoyed playing together. And it wasn't too much longer after that he submitted a song to the John Lennon Song Contest in New York City called Sorry, which later on became a hit for him on his first record. And he won this contest. Not only won it, but he blew people away so bad with this song that he almost immediately got a writer's deal at a publishing house in Nashville, and moved there and never came back. He's considering coming back now, but he's been down in Nashville writing hit songs for 25 years, and he's made a fortune, and he's done well, and he's just a tremendously talented man, like one of the most talented men I've ever met. And his albums were fantastic. He made 2 or 3 solo records over the years. He hates touring. He doesn't like performing very much. If you can make that kind of money and do that well, just sitting in your own studio writing songs with other people, I don't know why you'd bother touring. So I see his logic is sound, right? But there came a time near the end of Andre's tenure with us. In the last year, Andre could see that I was stagnating, and we started talking about, he looked at me one day and said, what are the chances that we could leverage some of the old contacts you have in Nashville? I mean, you worked down in that area around those people for 10 years, so what is there that we could do? Who could we talk to? And I said, well, Gordy's down there. Maybe I should call Gordy and see if I can't talk to him and spend some time with him and see, if there's a potential for, writing. Maybe writing is the key. Get a couple of, so I called Gordy. I said, I'm going to come down to Nashville for a couple of weeks and see what's happening. And he said, by all means, yeah, come on. I got a shack. It was out back of my place. He called it a shack. It was just like a really nice, outbuilding at his house in this little neighborhood in Nashville that he'd converted into a studio, and just a really cool little spot. And that's where he did the most of his writing and demoing, and he had everything in there. And so, yeah, so I put was no problem in those days. Just throw $3,000 or $4,000 in my wallet in America and just get in the car and drive down to the States. I mean, we were doing very well, even with all of the hiccups and road bumps and warts and everything that was on our situation. We were still doing very well financially. So down I go to Nashville and spent a couple of weeks. I got an extended stay room at a hotel, had a kitchen in it and all this stuff, and I spent the 2 weeks with Gordy just at the shack, and we wrote together. We wrote 2 songs together that got demoed with another guy named Mike Logan, who's a tremendous songwriter, who'd been there for years and hadn't got cut yet. He had a publishing deal because he was so friggin' good, but he hadn't been covered. And he was waiting for that first cover, and it was just, like, to give you an idea of how volatile the whole situation is down there. This guy was working there for years, was getting paid, a stipend, quite a good one per year to write, but hadn't actually done anything that recouped anything for the publishing house. And he was, at the time, he was telling me, he's like, I might have to cut bait and run because I'm not getting cut, and I don't know how much longer the publishing house is going to keep footing the bill for me and my family. And luckily, amazingly, just after I left there, he got picked up. A whole bunch of his songs get picked up for, of all things, the Backstreet Boys comeback record. And he got like 6 or 7 songs on this record, of course, that sold millions of copies. And so there he was. They said for life, And it's just that much of a roll of the dice in that city. And I was willing to take the chance. Me and Gordy had long conversations about what it is to be a pro writer in that town. And it's very, very difficult. And I'll never forget, he was having some people over to the shack one night who were in the business. They were mostly business people. There was a couple of writers, a couple of performers trying to get deals. Kind of a cross section of the personnel in that city. And before they got there, me and Gordy were sitting in the shack by ourselves, and we were sort of at the counter there, sitting on the stools where we were writing most of the time. And he looked across the counter at me. He said, I got to tell you something, JP. I said, okay, what is it? He said, don't ever divulge to people in this town what you're capable of doing. And I said, what do you mean? He said, if you get in a situation where you're playing, no matter what it is, don't hot dog it. If you bury somebody else in the room who's established as a player or whatever, and you come out and shred on whatever you're playing, you'll be ostracized in this town. And I said, what? He said, yeah, you can't. You have to play things really, really cool. Don't offer anything. Wait to be asked, and then just do the job. Just do what you have to do to get the job done. If you push it, if you go over the line and make it apparent that you're probably better than 80% of the players in this town, you will be shut out immediately. They don't like that here. They don't want people coming in from away and taking jobs when the person's obviously not going to be staying here, and blah blah. And he gave me the rundown. I was like, holy shit. And I said, well, okay, I'll behave myself. He said, what you need to do, he says, you need to move here. Just move here. I'll help you. Don't worry about, but you'll never get into this city until you're living here. That's the only way people will accept you, is if you come here and live and invest all your time and money into this city. If you just dip your toes, you'll never get anywhere because no one. And I understand it in a way because Nashville is a city of vagrants, right? How many people have gone to that city over the years? Thousands of people have gone into that city looking for the dream, you know, and they work menial jobs and they live in boarding houses and they live in, some of them end up homeless. And like, just like it's, you do, in order for the people in charge in that city to take you seriously, where they'll invest in you and not be afraid that you're going back, moving back to, to butthole Montana when you can't get everything you want right away. I mean, it makes sense that they're like, okay, well, this guy is whoever, whatever. He doesn't live here. He's not from here. He's from Canada. Who cares? He's not going to be here. He's not going to stay here. He's not going to add to this, the mosaic of this town. He's just coming in to see what he can get, and then he's going to leave. And so I get it. I understand exactly why you have to go there and just put your balls on the line. It isn't a half-assed thing that you can do. You have to go all the way or nothing. So that was the conversation we had before all these people showed up. So these people all showed up, and there was a female singer-songwriter who was looking for a deal, and there was a couple of some folks that were hanging around, and there was a couple of industry guys, and they were just a little bit loopy, like I could see right away that Gordy had a point. It was just like I could do, just about anything I wanted to, and these guys wouldn't necessarily be impressed, or there's. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was really bizarre. It was just like they were in charge of massive parts of this industry. You just knew that these guys were, a word from one of these guys was enough to put you in a wicked contract somewhere, either as an artist or a writer. But they just didn't seem to give a shit about anything musical. It was just like, there was some music played in there that night too, and they just didn't get it. It was weird. It was like they had never heard music before. And I was thinking to myself, these are the guys that are in charge. Like, this is an example of people in this town that are making major decisions that change an artist's life forever. And I thought, well, I don't know. This whole town is literally just luck of the draw, but anyhow, I didn't really feel like that was a bad thing, and I knew from being there for a decade before that nothing had really changed. It was luck of the draw then, except there was a lot more to be said in the 80s and 90s about having talent. Talent actually got you somewhere in that town when I was there. But in the middle of the 2000s, 2008, things had changed. Online music was starting to happen. Just things were changing, and country was going more and more and more pop. And now, today it is pop. It's not country at all. There's nothing country about country music today. It's a goddamn joke. So to make a long story short, by the end of that 2 weeks, I had a great time, and I felt like at the time I had made, like, Gordy really took me in. Like, he had me write with him and Mike Logan, and we wrote 2 really good songs. We went into the demo studio and cut them for Combustion Publishing, his company that he was signed to. He took me to meet the president of that company. I sat in the man's office and sang for him and sang him my songs, and he really liked them. And I thought, Gordy's right. If I move here, And even if I just come here and just stay until I get something going on, this could change everything. And so by the time I left there, I had decided that I was going to make the plunge. And I thought, Hilda could Hilda can stay at home and do whatever, and I'll still, I can still, she can go to work and do whatever she wants to do. I can send money home to keep all the bills paid, and or she can come with me. We can rent the house out. There were so many options we had because we weren't really tied to anything except that property that we owned in Cape Breton, and it was just like this could be if I can go down there for even 6 months and see that there's something about to be established, either as a writer or a performer, it would make total sense to just sell all this shit and move down there and do what I'm supposed to be doing, which is, and so when I got home and discussed this all with her, the conversation went nowhere. All I could see was that when I told her, I said, I belong down there. That's where I can make my future, is in that city. I'm in my prime of writing and playing. Well, actually, I wasn't. I thought I was. I was close to it. I was. What would I was 40. I was turning 40 years old, and I was 39. And I was close to my prime. I got better afterwards, but I was writing better and playing better than I ever had. And Gordy was really in my corner. And I said to Hilda, I said, that's what we need to do. I need to go down there and get this going. And then we won't have to worry about, because I could see the writing on the wall that we were losing Andre, and everything was falling apart again. And I was like, this is the way to get this done so that it won't fall apart at all. In my own head, I was thinking, if I can just get my own careers established without anybody else involved, her or anyone, then we can do whatever the hell we want. If she wants to continue being a Cape Breton pianist or whatever she wants to do, she can do. I'll find. Obviously, the money belongs to both of us, and I just thought it was a smart move to. We had been struggling through all this shit for so long. I thought if I just go and get something really solid going, that now we can talk about what we want to do in every other venue. Our marriage or whatever, this is freedom for us. If I can start to make money on a talent that really wasn't getting used much. My Nashville chops weren't getting used at all. I was stuck in a rut musically and live performance wise. It was just it was starting to become untenable for me. But all I could see coming off of her was she was losing her job. Her job. She obviously completely rejected this idea so harshly that I thought, well, what I don't even know what this means. I don't know how I'm going to be able to pull this off if I can't even get one shred of support from my wife. There's no way. How the hell am I going to pull this off? And sure enough, it didn't go down. It should have. I should have gone home and packed a bigger suitcase and went right back to Nashville. That's what I should have done, but I didn't. And at that point, I think that was when things finally, fell apart with with Andre. I can't even remember what it was. I really can't. But I remember that he was let go. Uh, he was owed money, I remember. And everything in my life, just was turned into a confrontation because of the way that everything was going behind the scenes for me. Everything was a confrontation with people. There was no clean breaks. It was just animosity and bullshit and just so there went Andre, and there and it was just it was really hard. It was really I was stuck again in this limbo with no direction. I don't even know who the hell was booking us at that point. And but we were still working. We were still getting booked, so I must have had an agent. I don't remember who it was. There was even a point in time just after that I think we were playing the Carlton in Halifax. And an old friend of mine came to see us named Tony Quinn. He's one of the nicest men I've ever met. He's just a solid guy. He's a comedian. He's a songwriter. He's a singer, actor. He's just a talented man. And his daughter Shannon Quinn at the time was starting to make a lot of inroads into the business as a fiddler, box player, singer. And Tony came to see us one night, and he caught me outside and said, we should all be touring together. You and Hilda and I and Shannon. Again, right? It's just like, yeah. And I thought, well, yeah, we should. Hilda seemed to like Tony. She knew him forever. And I thought, yeah. I said, what we really need is management, because we have nobody working that for us. And Tony's ears pricked up. He was like, really? He was like, yeah. I said, we don't really, because Tony would have been more than capable, because that's what the guy does. He's a wheeler dealer. He just knows what he's doing. And so, to make a long story short, he tried to come in as the idea evolved over a very short period of time, and he decided he was going to come in as management. But then he says to me, I really want to know what I'm getting into. And here was the thing, right? People didn't want to come out and say that they'd heard nightmare stories about my marriage and its effects on my career and people around me and all this stuff. And they didn't. It's just one of those things where you just don't go to a guy and tell him that his marriage sucks, right? And so Tony was trying to backhand that idea, rightfully so. And he's like, I'd like to talk to Andre. You think Andre would talk to me and tell me what I need to do and what he has done and God bless Andre. I knew Andre would talk to him. I knew that conversation would happen if I asked for it. So I set them up in a conversation, and a few days went by, and then Tony called me up and said, "There's no way I can do this job." And by that time I had sort of invested all my hopes and dreams in Tony, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, what happened? And he said, well, I just had a long conversation with Andre, and there's just no way I can do this. I mean, and then of course, Quinn goes, basically he just told me he would only entertain the idea of managing me if I was alone. And then I was like, what? He says, Andre told me that there's no point in getting involved with your career, because your marriage is too heavy an influence on it. And so I I lost it, and I called Andre up and I said some horrible things to him. Again, just I was not in my right mind. It just seemed like everything that was there that was potentially amazing was being taken away from me by my fucking marriage. And I lashed out at everybody who pointed that out to me. I was just in so much denial, and so like not denial, but just so stubborn, and so I just refused to. I didn't want to look like an idiot. I just didn't want to look like an idiot. I didn't want to admit that I had made a terrible choice and married somebody that just wasn't compatible with. Hilda might have been fine with somebody else, but she was not fine with me. And every time this cropped up, I got angrier and angrier. And I ended up saying horrible things to Andre I'll never forgive myself for, because he told the truth to Tony. He told Tony, there's no point. If you get involved with that, you're going to end up crossways with her at some point in time, and then your life's going to be a living hell, and you're probably going to lose money. You're going to lose the time invested. You're going to blah, blah. And it was all true. And so he did Quinn a favor, and then Quinn came back and to me, and backed out, and so there I was. And something amazing was about to happen that I didn't see coming. I don't remember the year it happened exactly, but there was a point in time when a man named Mark Peterson called me. He owned a music park out near Windsor called Kempt Shore, and he had several festivals there, bluegrass festivals mostly, and a country music festival, I think. And he called me up one day and he said, I'd like to start an actual folk festival called the Marital Acoustic Music Festival. And I was like, wow, that sounds great. And he said, there's only one condition. I said, what is it? He said, well, I want you to play it every year. I'm going to build the festival around you. It'll be your homecoming festival every summer. You play it every year. We'll get people in that gravitate to your kind of music, and we're going to build it around you. And I, at first blush, I thought, this guy's fucking crazy. And I didn't think, why the fuck would you do that? But he went and he did it. And the first year, we had 150 people out there. Then the next year it was 500. Then the next year it was 1,000. And by the time it peaked, it was over 10,000 people came to this tiny park. And the festival is still going today. Like, even though they lost 2020, I played it again this year for a limited, 250 people that were allowed in there with the COVID thing. And so there was something that happened down in that park. I ran into some people from my childhood, the Elliots. Carl Elliott, who was one of my biggest fiddle heroes and a judge at several of the contests that I won as a child. He had a band together with his sons, Mike and Bill, and sometimes a cousin was in there with them. And anyhow, they were called the Economy Mountain Boys or something like that, or Bass Mountain, or whatever. I think it was the Economy Mountain Boys. And they were shit hot. They played swing, they played old time, they played country. And I started hanging around with these guys at that festival, and so there was the guitar player, Carl's son, Bill Elliott. This guy was one of the best guitar players I'd ever seen, and a great entertainer. He could front a show. He knew what he was doing. And Mike, his brother, played as good a bass as anybody I've ever seen as well. And I started hanging around these guys, and people used to tell me, you shouldn't hang out with Bill. I was like, why? He said, because you'll never get along with Bill. You and Bill kill each other after a while. Because Bill's just like me. He has no filters. He doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks. And he has a severe self-esteem problem like me. He's suffered a lot of rejection, as musicians do. And a bit of a drinker, of course. I mean, so am I, right? But so people were telling me, man, you'll never get along with him for 5 minutes, right? Well, fuck, me and Bill were like brothers instantly. There was just something about him that drew me in, more than any other player I'd ever run into. And so, all of a sudden, these guys were in my life, Bill and Mike, one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. He had a really horrendous car wreck when he was young. He wasn't driving, he was in the back seat, and he almost died from it, and they had to do a trach on him, and he's got this huge scar across the front of his neck where they had sliced him open to get him, to save his life. And paralyzed part of his vocal cords. So he talks like this. And it's funny. He knows it's funny. He makes fun of it all the time, and he still sings. He can still sing a really good baritone part, even though he's like that. And so these guys just fascinated me. They were just such great musicians, and they came from the same background as me, and they listened to the same players, and they were just great guys. And I thought, holy shit, this is cool. And sure enough, one year, it was in 2009, Bill suggested to me, I don't know where I ran into him, but somewhere I ran into him, and he goes, we should all just gang up and play together, see what happens. And I thought, yeah, hell, why not? And we had a gig somewhere in Truro. I think it was at the Train Room or some weird place. We were taking some pretty shitty gigs at that point because, well, no manager. I don't know who was booking us, and I can't remember, but we were just taking some strange work, stuff I hadn't done and don't like doing. Don't like playing bars anyway. I had stopped doing it years before, and so we go out to Truro, and him and Mike sit in with me and Hilda. Well, me and Mike and Bill had a goddamn field day, and the music was incredible, and Hilda just sat in the corner just with a sour look on her face playing the piano all night and was clearly hating every moment of this because I was having a good time. So after that happened, I just made an executive decision. They're joining the fucking band. That's it. This is the crew. Because they were allowing me to, upsize my contribution to the live show because they could play stuff that Hilda couldn't play, really. But she was such a master of the piano that she could get in there and fake it and still sound fine. And so it just opened up a million doors musically and feel and groove. And we had good 3-part harmony. It just was a really killer thing, right? And so Kempt Shore was happening. And it's funny how things go down, man. It's just bizarre. At this time, in June of 2009, and it's like I said before, when things happen to me, they happen in these great giant clusters of fucking destruction. Like, just, it always happens that way. I don't know why, it just does. And so in June of that year, Jerry Holland, who, I mean, I could make a whole video about my relationship with Jerry, who is like a brother to me, and who was the most central person in Hilda's life as well. Even though, you know, she wasn't always flattering of Jerry when they were apart, but she loved Jerry, and Jerry loved her, and I mean, they were them, you know, Jerry and Hilda and Dave McIsaac, they were the dynamic trio of Cape Breton fiddle music. Over that summer, Jerry got sicker and sicker, and he had a knee problem. And it turns out that the knee was full of cancer. And something an oncologist told me one time, he said, you know, cancer never travels south to north. It travels north to south. It never travels up. And we never thought about that. You know, we figured he pounded his feet so much in his life that he blew his knee out. And, I mean, even Howie McDonald had this massive tumor taken off his hip, which was benign, but it was from pounding his foot for his entire life, right? Playing the fiddle. Well, turns out, you know, poor Jerry, he ended up in the hospital in palliative care. And the cancer had started actually in his lungs and had gone down into his knee. He was just riddled with it. And so there was no hope for him. And yeah, so I went to see him the day before he died. Actually, a couple days before he died. And he was in fine shape. He hadn't lost a bit of weight. He was up and talking. He jumped out of the bed and went to the bathroom for a pee. He was joking and laughing. And, you know, I took him by his hand before I left the room, and I said, I love you, old man. And he said, I love you too, JP. Jeez. I said, you're going to get out of here. Oh, yeah, don't worry about that. I'll be all right. And he wasn't all right. He died the next day. And we didn't expect that. And what ended up happening, and this is so strange how these things happen. So we were going to Kempt Shore, and that next day. And so we played our set that Friday night. I think it was a Friday night or Thursday or Friday night. And me, Hilda, and the Elliots, right? And it was awesome. It's been recorded. I mean, it's on YouTube. You can see it on there. And sometime during the evening after the show, someone came to us and told us Jerry Holland died. Well, Hilda, I mean, that was her family, really. So she's like, I'm going back to Cape Breton. And I was like, what? She said, you got the boys. You do the festival. I'm going the fuck back home. And which actually kind of shocked me a little bit. And so that night, that Thursday night at Kempt Shore was the last time, one of the last times that we ever, well, it was the last time that the four of us played as a band. That was her last show with me. She didn't know it then. But it was almost the last. There was one more show. But it was the last time the four of us were together as a band. And so she left. And that left me and Bill and Mike, frankly, high and dry, which pissed me off a little. I was thinking, Jerry wouldn't be too impressed with this. even though I knew Jerry. Jerry was about get the goddamn job done first and worry about everything else after. And there she was, just fucked off and left us there with no show, because me and Mike and Bill hadn't really prepared, an entire show, just us. So her leaving created this band. We became a trio that night, and that weekend. And when we hit the stage, boys, it was pandemonium. It was a whole other show. And it blew people's minds how good it was, and it blew our minds. And that was the beginning of the end of everything. My career to that point, my marriage, everything. That was the beginning of the end. The weekend that I ended up on stage with the Elliots, and that was the last major festival show that we did. So the boys and me bonded big time, and it was an automatic thing because they were just so good and so nice. Like, they were just nice men. They were just beautiful guys. We just laughed our asses off all the time, and they went way out of their way to play exactly what I wanted played. And then on top of that, they inspired me to play better and different and all this stuff, We didn't know it at the time, but that was the 9th of July, 2009. We only had 1 month left. That was it. There was only 1 month left. And at some point between July 9th and August the 9th of 2009, we went to play the Lewisburg Playhouse, and which is a gig that I've been playing since the place opened. I'm the only artist, I think, that's played there every single season since it opened. And it's a beautiful room. And we went to play that place one night, all four of us, and we finished sound check, and Hilda just hated these guys. She fucking despised them because they were usurping her position big time in a way that wasn't. She just wasn't the only moving part on stage anymore. It was just very unpleasant for her, and so her and I are sitting in the dressing room, one of the dressing rooms, and the boys are somewhere else in the hall. I don't know where they were. And I said, we should just take a second and go over something I wanted to talk about with the whole crew, musically, right? I said, I got to find the boys. And she looked at me and said, we don't need those fucking hillbillies. And I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, and I tell Bill this all the time, and he laughs his ass off. I said, Bill, you ended my marriage. You know that, right? You saved my life. And when she said that, that was the moment when I went, this is over. This is over right now. And because I was not going to lose another relationship with a brilliant musician, in this case, two of them, because she didn't approve of it. And I just, my brain went, that's it. This is fucking done. Done like a dinner. And boy, I didn't know how done it was. It was just maybe a week later that her and I, alone, the boys didn't come to this because it was a Cape Breton gig. It was playing at the Scottish festival, the Gaelic festival at Iona. and then a square dance that night. And her and I and Jim Hanlon and his daughter went out to this thing for the day. So now you may notice, you obviously notice that throughout all these videos, I have a sinus problem. You can tell that. I'm not a Coke user. I just have terrible allergies, and they plague me continually. And sometimes it gets so bad, in the days before they had some of these high-end steroid treatments like Flonase and all this stuff, I had nothing. There was nothing to take for it. So I would go through days where I would just sneeze. Every 5 minutes I would sneeze 10 times. And just be ruined. Nose be running all day, eyes running, can't talk, can't sing. Just horrendous, horrible allergy attacks, hay fever type attacks. So we were at this festival all day long, blaring hot sun, 9th of August. And I was having problems with my allergies. And then that night, I was booked to play the dance right beside the grounds from 9 till 1. I was the only fiddler. Play a square dance. So we go in there, and I'm already having difficulties with the nose. And they put this silica dust all over the wood floor so people's shoes slide easier when they're square dancing. Well, as soon as they started dancing, a cloud of that shit come up out of the floor. And I started breathing that in, and I couldn't stop sneezing. And Hilda gave me, I don't know if it was a Benadryl or something. She said, have you got anything? And she handed me some allergy tablet, and I took it. And Hilda, by the time we finished this dance, they wanted us to stay there. They had a motel right beside the hall, and they're like, just go up. And I was like, no, fuck it, we got to go home. And Jim was drunk, so he couldn't drive. Hilda had a few, not much. She didn't really ever get drunk. And I had nothing. And I didn't know Jim's daughter well enough to let her put her under the wheel, so I get under the wheel of this truck. It was a 2007 Chevy Silverado, loaded, LTZ. Beautiful truck. That's what we were touring in for several years. And so, get under the wheel of this truck, and I'm feeling fine, and Jim is in the front seat with me. And we left Iona, we went down to the ferry, took the ferry across, drove out to the main highway and turned right to go home. And Nyanza's right there. It's a First Nations reserve. And the speed limit went down to 70, so I put the brakes on and got her down. And I looked Jim and I were talking back and forth, right? So also, I was unaware at that time of how bad my sleep apnea was. I had apnea for 10 years before I was ever diagnosed, and I had a bad habit, sometimes when I was really exhausted, of falling asleep. And so here I was, exhausted from playing for, 7 hours of playing, plus had some kind of an antihistamine in my system, which I'd never take either because they put me to sleep. And I was driving along, and I says to Jim, I'll never forget this, I said, well, we better be careful here because they have their own police. They had the First Nations were the police there. And so I just got finished saying that. And then I opened my eyes, and I was going into a left-hand curve, but the truck was going straight. everything changed at that minute.